Hello, this is Llyn Hunter, L-L-Y-N-H-U-N-T-E-R. I'm going to be doing a demonstration of a ballpoint pen drawing today. It's going to be the underdrawing for a painting of a type of work or an illustration I call a punny because it's a visual pun. What I'm showing you here first is these are all the tools that we're going to be using today. This is a Pentel 0.9 millimeter pencil. That's what I used to do the drawing on the piece. And I just wanted to show you that this is the mechanical pencil I used for this particular piece. This is a kneaded eraser. I use this quite a bit when I'm doing drawings. I'm going to show you about ghosting back a drawing and then going over it in. We're going to be using good old Bic stick ballpoint pen because it's like crayon resist. It's a petroleum based product, so basically when you paint with watercolor it acts like a visual dam. You can do this with India ink or ballpoint pen, works really well. When you're using graphite, graphite has petroleum in it as well. That's also why it will act, or it will still come through watercolor when you use it. But ballpoint pen has a really, really nice quality to it that I like, and that's what I'm going to be using on this particular drawing today. I have this sticky note pad here to basically test my ballpoint pens on before I'm drawing. But what we're going to do first is this particular drawing is basically, if you can see it, is very loose, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to do what I call ghosting back the drawing with the kneaded eraser. And what I'm doing here is it'll look like I'm totally erasing the drawing away, but what I'm really doing is what I call ghosting back, and you'll build up quite a bit of graphite on the kneaded eraser, so you might want to clean it a few times. And see, I'm pulling off the drawing that I did, and you'll take the kneaded eraser maybe and clean it a few times. And what this does is it pulls the graphite into the inside of the eraser. And one of these erasers, after, you know, geez, I don't know, maybe 30 to 50 drawings, will get very black and full of graphite, at which point you throw it away. But for the most part, it picks up the graphite that is on the drawing, and all I want is to have the ghost of a drawing underneath. So it's basically my skeleton, and you could tell I did the drawing really, really loose to begin with, to just give me the basics of it. Now, what I'm doing here is this particular visual pun is, now this is why I have this pad, to get your pen flowing, because basically the ink is inside in a tube and you've got a ball on the end of your ballpoint pen. And so the thing is that the rolling of that ball at the end of the pen pulls the ink out. And it's a special petroleum sticky distillate pen or ink that I'm trying to think of the name of the gentleman who created it. I think it was Faber. He's a Frenchman who created the original ballpoint pen, and that ink is like this special type of ink that is made from petroleum, and you know it will last for a while simply because if any of you have ever had ballpoint pen get on cloth and you try to wash it out, it is a pain in the butt to get off of cloth. It does stick. It's also why, you know, they used it as permanent. It's considered permanent because you can sign checks with it. That's the only type of ink that they allow for check signing, because it's difficult to get rid of. You can get it away though, but it does have a permanence to it. And I'm not sure, I've not done a sun test on ballpoint. There are some people who have done sun tests on it, and different types of ballpoint pen colors are very fugitive in sunlight. But there are artists out there who work in the colored ballpoint pens too. So there are some colors that'll fade faster than others, and some pen types that will do better in the light than others. But I figure that there are ballpoint pen documents that have lasted over 100 years, and they're still very dark. So I myself feel that you can probably use ballpoint pen and not be too concerned about it fading over the years, even, unless the piece is like out in direct sunlight. And most people don't put their artwork in their houses somewhere where they're going to be in direct sunlight. So I'm pretty confident that most of my ballpoint pen pieces will at least outlast me by a couple hundred years, if not more. It all depends, I always wonder sometimes, what art will outlast us, what will be saved and what will be thrown away, what ends up in the garbage and what ends up in somebody's collection. How do you know what's going to be saved and what isn't? That's why I look at a lot of the digital artwork that's being done nowadays, and I'm doing it myself, because it's very easy to correct. If you are doing digital artwork, it's extremely easy to correct. So it's like if you want to make changes in color, if you want to make changes in value, all those things are extremely easy to fix. So everybody is going to digital art because you can make it. Boy, airbrushing is so much easier now. I mean, it's instantaneous. You just pick an airbrush and you can mask things so easily. When I used to use airbrush on some of my fantasy pieces, and I think about the difference between utilizing digital artwork now and traditional. And I never want to have to clean an airbrush again. Oh, they are such a pain in the butt to clean. But anyways, I still love doing watercolor as a traditional art. And I still personally can't find a way to get the effects that I do with watercolor in digital. There might be a way now, and I just haven't been taught it or haven't found the right brushes or the right techniques on the computer that give me the effects of watercolor brush that I want. I'm sure it's me more than the digital, but there is something about working on physical paper that still has an allure to it that nothing else does. On top of the fact, you have a unique artifact when you're done, whereas you don't have a unique artifact when you're done with digital. Digital is working with information, and when you're done, you have, unless you print it out, when you print it out, you have a physical artifact. But again, it's not real, and I still have a personal problem with the idea that you don't have the nice artifact when you're done, or you don't see every line that the artist really put into that artwork. And it's not that should be a bother. Nowadays people don't have a problem with that at all. And I find too with digital art, it will take me as long to do a digital painting as it will to do a traditional one. Because I did a lot of fantasy artwork in the around the 2000 to about 2015. I'm hoping to get back to doing fantasy artwork again, but I did a lot of collectible card art for Aldrich Entertainment Group, AEG, on games called Warlord and Legend of the Five Rings and Doomtown, and these were all done traditionally in acrylic. and watercolor. Or basically acrylic is watercolor. It's a water-based paint. And so the thing is that I'm doing more digital painting because it has more of a photorealistic look to it. And that's what the art directors want now. They don't want anything that looks like it had a brush stroke in it, or they want it more perfect looking than any kind of thing with flaws in it. So anyways, I still like doing things like this where I'm working in ballpoint pen, and when I get done with this pen drawing, I will go back and paint it in watercolor and then go over it one more time in ballpoint pen to finish it up. As you can see, I've got the queen bee here. I'm giving her a beehive hairdo, giving her a little bit of a, she's going to have a fur-lined robe, and I'm going to give it a bit of a honeycomb pattern to her robe. And she's going to be holding a scepter that has a rose at the end. Her crown is going to be made up of emerald and rubies. And she's going to be, your standard honeybee is going to be golden yellow. So I think it'll look really pretty with her being yellows and browns, and then having a ruby scepter. And I'll come back in with some acrylic for the highlights, so I can have some white highlights. When my paint in watercolor, this one I think I'm going to possibly do in liquid acrylic, just because the greens in liquid acrylic are very intense, and I haven't found green that I really like with watercolor that I can get the intensity that I can get with liquid acrylic. So that's probably what the painting is going to be done in. And as I go along here and I'm doing the legs, you can see there's a ghost. Like I said, I started out with a ghost drawing. We ghosted it back. And the initial drawing didn't take me terribly long to do, but I didn't want to spend the time on the video with that, since it's going to take me at least 30 minutes to do the initial drawing for this. Now, what I'm going to do right now too is that ink is not dry yet. This is ballpoint pen ink, so I'm going to use the Post-it to put my palm down on top of, because the ink that I'm drawing on top of as I'm drawing away here is going to smear if I don't put something under my hand, and then I'll have to correct it after the fact, which is not that bad either. And okay, there's a little jot there. It says to me that the ink's building up on the tip of my pen, and so I'm occasionally I'll have a paper towel in my other hand so that I can get those little balls of blots off the ink. But sometimes I like that because it ends up being like punctuation. That little bit of a dot is more or less like a period and gives some life to the drawing. It's one of the other reasons why I really like ballpoint pen. As you can see, this is with Bic Stick especially, has a tendency to do these like this, these little jots from the buildup. And if you get one in a place you don't want it, I'll show you how I'm bound to make a mistake somewhere here, or do something that I really don't like, and I'll have to scrape it away with this thing. You use a blade to correct your mistakes. I'm working with Arches. Let's see, it's 150 pound or 300 gram watercolor paper, and the reason why you want it's hot press. Hot press watercolor paper has been made from when it's being the fibers are being pressed on a wire mesh frame. That's how you get the paper. They will heat the paper as they press the water out of the mesh, and that's what it gives it, the really smooth surface. So this has got a much smoother surface than what most watercolor paper is usually cold press, which they do the same thing, but it gives it a little bit of a roughness. And then there's what's called rough watercolor paper, where what they've done is they've used a heavier screen than in the hot press or cold press, so that it gives it extra texture. And what that does with watercolor is it gives it the kind of the glittery effect or the sparkling effect that you get in watercolor sometimes, because the paint will sit in the cups of the roughness of the paper. So that's why people will use rough watercolor paper or cold press over hot press. And hot press, the problem that you have sometimes is you will have what's known as foxing, when the paint or heavily pigmented paint sits on the surface of paper that is very smooth. It will sometimes dry with these little like plant almost looking tendrils, and it would be known as foxing. If you see when mold gets into a book, it will fox the edges, or it'll do foxing stains. And some people don't like that with hot press, because it's a difficult how shall I say, it's a difficult condition to control. It gets out of hand, and some people don't like, okay, the foxing goes in a direction they don't want it to, and you'll have to figure out how to fix the mistake. And that's the problem with hot press. But again, I've learned a variety of techniques to counteract that sort of thing from happening. Okay, so we've almost got our little bee done. We've got to do her wing on the other side. Yeah. And then we're going to do some flowers around the bottom. Let's see here. Actually, I want to give her honeycomb. And to do a honeycomb, all you do are circles. Honeycomb is hexagonal. And all you have to do is say a line of circles that are all the same size. And then you fill in another line of circles right next to the one you just did. And that basically, you'll get a six-sided, where they touch each other, ends up being a hexagonal shape, because these are all the same size, or you try to make them the same size. Eyeball it, as the case may be. That's how we'll get our initial honeycomb. So she's got a honeycomb design on the inside of her cloak. And you can see there's blopping going on, and it's difficult to see in the film here, but all those blops are wet. So you've got to be very careful, actually, while you're drawing, you know, again, not to stick your hand in the mud, as the case may be. Because what you'll do is, you can see I've done a little bit of smearing here. There's a couple of smears there. If those don't come out while I'm erasing, once the ink is dry, I will, again, I'll scrape them away with the X-Acto knife blade. And like I said, the paper is so good that if you're careful about just scraping them away, you can paint on top of it, and you won't be able to see that there was ever any scraping going on. And I'm going to keep the back of her robe basically clear at this time. I might want to put some flowers on the back of her robe, but I think I'm just going to keep it one color, like I'll do it red or something. And I'm doing more vibration lines. And I think I'm going to put vibration lines around her a little bit too, so she feels like she's flying. And this is a illustration or a cartooning technique when you throw lines around something. And I've been writing in my journals lately. One of the things that I find amusing or interesting in our society currently is that if you do anything figurative, it's like what I'm doing here is not art. If you guys want to know, this is not art. This is illustration, or it would be considered cartooning, or something along those lines. But in the fine art world, this is not art. This is something else. I mean, it's like I'm doing a visual joke, right? I'm showing a queen bee. So this isn't real art. Now, what I'm doing here with the rose that I'm doing right now, if you want to do roses, think of bananas. These are like the lips of the petals. And as you're going around, think of just interlocking C's, because as the petals come out, they're more like a C shape. So a C on top of a C, and you have the petal dropping back. So think of that as the lip of the petal. So a double line C will give you a feeling on a rose of petal. And then on the outside, you just pull that C down and you have your rose. And once you paint that, in the inside of these will go dark, and on the outside you go light. And then if you guys come back to see the painting on that, I'll show you how to make the roses really look full. But if you can see, all this is that it's a C on top of a C. And all depends. With your roses, the petals will have like one little nip out there, or how would you say, the little point. So I'm making her, she's flying around some tea roses. I'll put another one over here. I had that one facing in, now I'm going to have it face out. So you can see, you can just create roses by that C within a C within a C. So if you look at your roses in a garden, or you can get some silk roses, or you can look at roses on the internet. I mean, the nicest thing that everybody's got is access to all kinds of reference material now on the internet. I wish I'd had that kind of reference when I was a kid. It's so nice to be able to just call up, you know, I for the bee, when I wanted a little bit of reference for it, I basically just, you know, put into the Google search queen bee. And the queen bees have a little bit longer body than the drones. And even though this is a cartoon, I like to be able to have look at reference from real life and get a little bit, the more reference you use, the more realistic, or throw a little bit of realism in with your drawing. I don't know, it gives it more solidity to me. It's something that I personally like. I like to make my animals look like the animals. And even though this is a cartoon bee, I want to give her a little bit of realism to her personality. And the same thing with the roses. I mean, the roses are a bit off. They're not exactly as roses would be, but they are rose-esque. Whenever you paint leaves on a rose, they're 5 leaves to a set. You know, things like that that you learn about roses. If you the leaves should be toothed, like, you know, with little teeth on them. But if you've ever looked at a rose, and that's the thing, when you're drawing and painting and you want to try to get things more accurate or more looking somewhat realistic, put a few buds here. There we go. What I'm going to do, probably in the painting, I will put some red dots up in the sky to give it, to harmonize, like up in this area right here, but I'm going to leave that area basically blank right now. And what I'm going to do for the final on this, I'll go back over my outlines here, and I heavy them up and start making more connections. But the thing is, I want to keep the drawing relatively loose, because what I'll do is when I finish up the piece, I will go over the entire thing again and heavy up the lines. So it'll be more like anchoring the definition of the drawing down with heavier lines. But I usually do that after I've painted everything, because that way you can paint relatively loosely again while you're doing the actual painting, and then if you come in after the fact and heavy up the lines, then it'll take care of where you've been really loose in the painting too. And again, this is all a matter of taste. It's when you're doing your drawing, whether you want to do it tight or loose is all totally up to you. So we're just about done with this portion of the drawing. Can you see? So we've got our little queen bee with her queen hive, and I'm gonna do, like I said, I'm gonna do this all kind of like emeralds and rubies. Listen to emeralds and rubies, and maybe the back of her cape red, but the inside yellow, and maybe put some highlights in her hair that are red and what have you. But that's it for the drawing for now. I will go back into, because it's still wet, the ink itself is still wet, it's got to sit for a bit. But what you'll do when you want to fix something, like there are 2 spots here, and I want to clean those up. So I'll take the knife and I'll just scrape those down. So you can see this is just, I'm using the edge of the knife, and you can see the buildup of the paper. It's like almost like sawdust. And you just take your kneaded eraser, and I'll use a latex eraser too, and get that, scrape that back. Also, you can I still have some of the drawing is down here. I will go in after the the pen drawing is completely dry. So you want to let it sit for probably an hour or so after you do the pen drawing, because there are lots of little blobs of ink on there that aren't dry yet, and let it cure, because that's kind of what ballpoint pen does, it cures. But anyways, that's the drawing for Queen Bee. The next video will be painting of Queen Bee. So please come back. I'm posting a new video every week. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got something out of it. Thanks for stopping by. Again, my name is Llyn Hunter, L-L-Y-N-H-U-N-T-E-R. You can find me on Patreon, Instagram, and all over the web. Thank you very much for stopping by.